And we're finally getting to Chapter 5, the dreaded Chapter 5, Night of the Witches 1. I've been dreading this mostly because I don't want to finish this game yet. I've been really enjoying the characters and the story, and just these animations that are so beautiful, like just the clouds moving and everything. This is like one of the best, like the visual novel I've seen with like some of the best effects. Like I've never seen better effects in a visual novel than this. They must have just, like I said before, they must have blown their budget on this. I don't even know. But, yeah, I know Chapter 5 is going to be the end, so we're pretty much at the end right now, and I'm sad, and I don't want to end it. I don't want it to end here. I want to keep playing. So, I guess if we, when I finish with this video, or when we finish up Chapter 5, if somebody wants to tell me in the comments if there's going to be any updates on the translation. I know I'm going to be keeping track of it, and I haven't seen any updates on the translation for this visual novel, but if there are any updates that I'm not aware of, somebody please let me know. I would love to know, because I want to keep playing this. This is really good. This is probably, I'll be honest, I like this. I don't like it better than Fate Stay Night, but I like it better than Tsukihime. Like, story-wise and character-wise, even though we haven't really gotten to the meat of the game yet. We haven't gotten into the main plot. We haven't, I'm assuming Chapter 5 is going to be where we're going to get into the plot, because seeing as Aoko is planning to get rid of Sojiro, and I know that I'm pretty sure Sojiro ends up eventually living with Aoko and Alice, so I assume that when we get to that point, that's where the plot is going to get kick into high gear, I'm assuming. But so far, nothing really has happened. It's mostly just been introductions and getting to know the characters, which I don't mind. I completely understand. So it's kind of a slow start, but I don't really mind that because I really like the characters. But I don't know. I honestly like everything about this so far. So when we get into the plot, I'm going to like it even more. So that being said, let's stop delaying the inevitable here. Let's get this going. Sojiro walked home under the cloudy sky, just like always. His steps clanged with a rusted metallic sound as he climbed the stairs to his apartment. On the way, he happened to catch sight of a bike parked next to the wall around the building and thought that it would be nice to have one himself. But since he didn't have any excess funds and it wasn't a matter of life and death, he decided to endure without a little while longer. Arriving at his door, he cradled his shopping bag full of apples into one arm and pulled out his key. A bike really would be useful, but he tilted his head in confusion. Why was he letting himself get swept away in useless thoughts when he had more important things to worry about? Like what to make with all these apples he'd been given. Apple pie? Is Sojiro... Well, I would assume Sojiro has to be good... Well, no, he just washes the dishes. I was like, no, wait, he has to be good at cooking because he works at a restaurant. But he's just the dishwasher. I don't think we've seen him cook. Maybe he's the polar opposite of Shiro, where he's not good at cooking. He set the bag down in the sink, then switched on the lights. But then again, I would assume if he's living by himself, he would have to know something about cooking. It was just past 10 o'clock. Exams were coming up, so he had to come home an hour earlier than usual. Just as he was about to turn back to the kitchen and grab an apple to munch on, he noticed an envelope stuffed into the mail slot. There was no return address, or even a stamp. Inside was a letter, which stated only the name of the sender and the matter at hand. The content was simple. I need to talk to you, so meet me here tonight. It's important, so I'll wait for you as long as it takes. Obviously, don't tell anyone about this. It was terse and written with a commanding hand. The sender was Aozaki Aoko, and she had been kind enough to include a detailed map to the meeting place. Wondering what this was all about, he left his apartment. Uh-oh. We all know what this is about. Soon after, in the now empty room, the discarded envelope suddenly burst into flames and vanished, as if it had never even existed at all. In the latter half of the 1980s, the economic boom appeared to be calming as a period of stable economic growth took hold. Modernization was progressing steadily, and a JR station symbolizing the new era was on the verge of completion. And another new symbol would emerge in Misaki's neighboring town of Yashigori, or Yashirogi. Excuse me. I always get that name wrong. Whoa. Its name was Yashirogi Bread and Kitsi Land. It was Misaki City's largest source of bad debt, an eyesore left behind by an ephemeral economic bubble. This town lacks dreams and sophistication. 10 years ago, Under that slogan, the owner of the Tokitsu Bread Company and local celebrity Tokitsu Yoruhiko, then 56 years old, started developing his land holdings on the outskirts of Yoshirogi for the construction of what he had hoped would become Misaki City's premier recreational attraction. And in 1981, it opened. It had taken a full 3 years, but the short life of the amusement park, overflowing with dreams and humor, had finally begun. Its ground area totaled 350,000 square meters. Immediately after entering, visitors were greeted by a luxurious and splendid merry-go-round. A roller coaster encircled the entire park like a writhing dragon, and towering above it all was a Ferris wheel loaded with useless gimmicks that challenged the limits of engineering. It's perfect. Everything an amusement park needs is here. Mr. Yoruhiko looked out fondly over his life's ambition. As if to bolster his confidence, it never saw greater success than it did at its opening. But they had dreadfully misjudged the balance of dreams and sophistication. The mascot, Kitty-chan, was overly plain and felt like a knockoff character. The inside of the park was littered with fresh-baked bread stands. The labyrinth-like Hall of Mirrors was an esoteric, out-of-fashion relic of the early 80s. There are no dreams in Kitsyland, only nightmarish humor. Kitsyland faced harsh criticism from all the major trade magazines, and attendance dropped. To make matters worse, there was even an incident in which a 6-year-old child was separated from his mother and almost died. 5 years after opening in 1986, between the ever-worsening business slump and the retirement of Mr. Yoruhiko, who had devoted his final years to making Kitsy-chan a breakout hit, the management of Kitsyland grew difficult. And so, the short life of Misaki City's solitary, hated amusement park finally came to an end. Well, it's a bit of a digression, but it's said that the self-styled Parisian artist that designed Kitsy-chan, Toki Julich, broke his brush in mourning when he had heard of the park's closure. Now, I knew it. They're going to meet in the amusement park. They did reference Kitsyland before. I guess now they're actually going to. It's actually going to be an important thing in regards to the plot. The Midnight Kitsyland didn't even show an ounce of its former glory. Like a lonely doll shoved into the corner of a toy box and forgotten, the only light shone in from the still-living town nearby. So that's how it is. Sojiro closed the guidebook to Yoshirogi he'd picked up on his way to the park. It was almost an unbelievable history, but he could at least accept that this place had seen better days. The main entrance was unlocked. When he came here before for work, the thick iron fence had been secured with rusty chains, but now the chains were gone, and the gates were cracked open. Following the map drawn on the letter, he quickly squeezed his way inside. Still, I wonder what she wants. What's so important that it couldn't wait until morning? He grumbled uncharacteristically. It was probably because even he, who was ignorant of the world, knew that what she was doing was wrong. Trespassing in a ruin was still trespassing. Unlawful entry, robbery, theft. Certainly, they were all crimes and nothing to be proud of, but... Sorry, but cash is a little tight right now. I hope you can forgive me for letting myself in. Apparently that was the only thing bothering him. He clasped his hands together in offering before the statue of Kitty-chan, whose painted eyes had begun to melt pleasantly out of their sockets. Then, leaving the mascot and its bloody tears behind him, he walked deeper into the park. "You're gonna die, boy." Faded buildings, rusted machinery. This is another thing I really like about the visual novel. It has a great soundtrack. Like, I really love pretty much all the tracks in this game, especially this one. It's just very soothing and melancholic almost. Well, I guess you could say sort of melancholic. For the man-made inhabitants of this park, time stopped long ago. Even the ghosts had abandoned this ghost town. It was a fossilized dream, the last vestiges of a paradise built by human hands, then left behind by humans, a relic from an era of prosperity, where people's lives grew ever better, and nobody feared the future. His white breath trailed behind him as he walked. He wasn't afraid of this lonely place. It was nothing compared to the darkness of the mountains. Kitsyland was unique for an amusement park in that it was built directly adjacent to a residential district. Though it was surrounded by woods, in the end, those two were man-made. Like curtains on the window, they could only obscure the outside world, not make it disappear. If he hopped the fence and cut through the 20 or so meters of trees planted on the other side, he would find himself right back in the familiarity of town. So, although this nighttime park was a place of dread for the people of the city, to him it was no scarier than the hustle and bustle near the station. And that one woman in the pachinko machines. That looks like some haunted house or house of mirrors or something. Is that it? Sojiro followed the directions west, out of the silent central plaza. His destination was a rugged, strikingly majestic castle, towering against the cloudy backdrop of the night. Oh, it's a castle. The structure was conspicuously huge, even for this abandoned park. If the roller coaster and Ferris wheel were moving attractions, this one was completely static. It was one of the three great symbols of Kittyland, and, in a way, the demonic building that had ushered in the destruction of this paradise. Generally, amusement park mazes were divided into two broad categories: the labyrinth, which befuddled visitors with its vastness, and the Hall of Mirrors, which confused them with tricks of light and optical illusions. Yep, pretty much. The labyrinth allowed a large number of visitors to enjoy the feeling of being on an adventure, if only for a little while. In later years, it would fall out of favor as other more exciting attractions appeared, but such was the fate of every fad. New things would always be replaced by newer things. The Hall of Mirrors, on the other hand, was a beloved classic. By effectively manipulated mirrors and light, visitors could have fun getting lost in a space no bigger than a school classroom, and because they didn't cost much, they had far more longevity than labyrinths. Even if they had no place in the coming century, the fact remains that both attractions were a hallmark of amusement parks. However, while they each had their merits, mixing them was unwise. Far from an enjoyable maze, the result would be a demonic realm of no return. And, naturally, that's exactly what Kittyland Mystery Tour Castle was. A full 5% of those who entered had to be rescued by the staff. The building, made to resemble a western castle, was roughly 100 meters long from front to back, and the interior was further divided into 3 stories. The labyrinth, spanning 2 above-ground floors and a basement, was entirely lined with mirrors, and was so vast and complex that even a veteran maze runner would need half an hour to escape. A single step inside meant descending into a spectrophobic hell for the next half a day. Though now it was merely a shadow of its former self, that was the obstacle standing in Sojiro's way. I must get through this house of mirrors. I must find Aoko. There's light. Guess somebody must have turned on the power. Of course, that was all meaningless to him. He didn't even know what a Hall of Mirrors was, so the only thing that caught his interest was the fact that it wasn't totally dark. He checked the letter Aoko had given him one more time. It said she would be waiting for him in the first floor lobby of the Hall of Mirrors. This was definitely the right place. There was a faint light inside, shining through the open entrance. Brushing away any lingering doubts, he approached the Hall of Mirrors. The sound of his footsteps lingered faintly over the brick road, far from the clamor of the city. In this place that hadn't heard so much as the ticking of a clock in years, the winter night was deathly quiet. It was a silence so deep it almost seemed a crime to break it. He stopped abruptly at the building's entrance. By the way, Aoko, what are you doing back there? He called out, turning toward the plaza he had just come from. The hell? A sound suspiciously similar to somebody diving behind a garbage can rang out. A brief silence. The abandoned amusement park returned to its previous stillness for almost a minute. Then, with an air of resignation, a girl walked into view. You're really bad at hiding, aren't you? Ow! His voice stopped in his throat. He had never seen her in casual clothes before. This Aozaki Aoko, her long hair fluttering in the breeze, was completely different from the girl he knew. I am going to kill you, Mr. Sojiro. The way she carried herself emphasized her iron will. Her gaze was piercing. Her clear eyes literally seemed to glow with an unearthly light. So she's kind of like, she's almost kind of like Rin Tosaka in a way that she's like completely different at school, and then when she gets into like her master mode, she's, you know, a completely different person almost. The coldness of ice and a girl's strength. The only difference here is that Aoko is just a Soon, and Tosaka is a tsundere. So that incongruous combination was enough to cause Sojiro, who completely lacked any sense of impending crisis, to feel like something was wrong. If he had to describe it, it was like a Yuki Onna from a ghost story had appeared in reality. Aoko? He stepped back unconsciously. His mind swirled with faint surprise and unease, and a foreboding premonition that exceeded them both. Despite his confusion, he had called out according to the manners of the city, but... Your face is kind of, are you upset about something? Without saying a word, she took a single step forward. Something about her, in that moment, stirred his fuzzy memories. The vague misgivings he held in his heart began solidifying into firm conviction. Though at the time he had only seen its back, in retrospect, the figure he saw in the park that night and the girl before him now, somehow, Don't they seem eerily alike? He gulped nervously.
You want to know what I was doing? It's exactly what it looked like. I was waiting for my prey to pass by. After you came in, I followed behind you to cut off your escape. She looked a little depressed as she explained herself. Clearly, she hadn't expected to be found out like this.
Oh, good. So this is the right place after all. Come on, Sojiro, really? Inwardly, he sighed in relief. This is not a good thing. Nothing about this is good. I thought that Sojiro actually would have realized it, considering he remembers that she was involved in what he saw that night. Perhaps he had remarkable composure, or perhaps he merely couldn't grasp the situation he was in. I want to say it's probably the latter. Or it could be both, who knows. Either way, Aoko disregarded his sluggish reaction and continued speaking.
You know, Sojiro, I've got people I dislike and people I hate, just like everybody else. But the strange thing is, that's not enough to become my enemy. Her icy eyes burned with a fiery emotion. She took another step forward. Sojiro's sense of foreboding grew stronger and stronger. No, more than that. He felt killing intent. He stepped back. Somehow or other, the distance between them was staying at a constant 5 meters. For as long as I can remember, I've never thought of somebody I disliked as an enemy. But on the flip side, there have been times that my enemy is somebody I like. The reason is simple. She raised her right arm. The light shimmering across her clothes was not an optical illusion. It's just a matter of course. For me, anybody who agitates my emotions is an enemy. Her raised right arm moved. Instantly.
Ooh. He's dead.
Some alarming, hard-to-see thing whizzed by Sojiro's left, missing him just by 20 centimeters.
What the...
Witnessing that blue light, that fireball conjured out of nothing, he finally grasped the situation.
Hey, wait a minute, would you... I just remembered something important.
Completely ignoring his outburst. I shot wide, she grumbled to herself. Not only had the blue light left a fist-sized hole in the wall of the Hall of Mirrors, it was still smoldering loudly. It was probably more than capable of caving in and scorching a human head. Huh, if Alice had seen me miss from this close, I'd have to kill myself out of shame. But you understand now, right? You won't get lucky a second time. Sojiro rapidly backed away. Saying he didn't understand would be an understatement. He could barely process what was going on at all. The only things he could see were the figure of the girl that had been a reliable student council president up until now, and the flashback to what he had witnessed at the park 2 days ago. He didn't have any experience with this kind of thing, though to be fair, most people who lived in a civilized country wouldn't. When faced with a lethal weapon that could kill with a simple squeeze of the finger, the human mind loses the ability to distinguish dream from reality, past from present, and of course, good from evil. The more peaceful the life up until that point, the more pronounced the effect. All that remains is a single thought: I'm still alive. A solitary black dot on a blank sheet of paper. Looking neither backward nor forward, it becomes their entire existence. Those are the oh-so-normal thoughts of a human staring down the barrel of a gun. Don't bother begging for your life, it won't make a difference. But feel free to voice your grievances, if you want. I won't deny Guy his last words. The fact that she said it wouldn't make a difference meant that she probably wouldn't actually listen to what he had to say. Not that it mattered. In his state of shock, Sojiro couldn't even remember how to speak. Only one thing was certain. Whatever her reasons, the girl in front of him wanted to kill him. Even lies have a limit. Tomomaru, you idiot! What do you mean there's no way that kind of creature exists? There's a monster like that standing right in front of me. He almost said it out loud, but he had a feeling that if he did, a second shot would come flying at him before he could finish. Cursing his friend had allowed his shock to progress into panic. However, his recovery didn't stem from a cool head. Someday, without warning, I'll be killed by someone. It was totally ridiculous, of course. That's right, murders happen in the city. It's normal to be killed if you break the rules, that's what I was taught. But for Sojiro, who was not yet used to the way of life here, it seemed all too believable. Apparently, the reality of being murdered by a classmate wasn't so astonishing to him. He could accept that things like that had happened in a society where people killed each other, and didn't question the chain of events that led to this violent situation at all.
I think I kind of would be questioning the chain of events. Although I guess to Sojiro, I'm pretty sure even though Sojiro is a complete idiot, he would be like, oh yeah, that's right, I saw that thing in the park, and I shouldn't have seen that, and now I'm being silenced. So the only thing that he couldn't wrap his head around had been the fire that Aoko conjured.
He gulped down the saliva pooling in his mouth. It was clearly the reaction of a victim paralyzed with fear. That's how it is. You finally understand, right? There's nothing else to say, so I'm going to have to ask you to die now. I could go on and on about how sorcery is something that must be hidden, but honestly that has nothing to do with you. Just consider yourself unlucky. The only thing that matters is that I'm going to kill you.
You know, this is strangely like the beginning of Fate Stay Night, where Shiro saw something he shouldn't have seen and Lancer was about to silence him, and then he did actually kill him and Shiro got resurrected, and then Lancer tried to kill him again, but he was saved. So this is kind of like that. This is really giving me Fate vibes.
Once again, Aoko raised her right arm. A mechanical hum filled the air, and blue light shimmered beneath her clothes. Sojiro couldn't help but notice that she was taking longer than before, which could only mean one thing: the next shot would be even stronger than the one burning a hole in the wall behind him. His panic intensified. No, wait, whether or not she's going to get rid of me, whether she's the monster from that night, whether the city is complicated, that's not the issue here. His thoughts were confused. His heart was pounding. This was no time to be standing still. He wasn't even sure if the girl before him was human. But setting that aside, even if he accepted everything that was going on, if he really thought about it. Please stop! Killing is wrong! It might be the rules of the city, but he still didn't want to die.
Oh no, you shouldn't have said that.
You think I don't know that?
Hey, wait!
His astoundingly oblivious comment had managed to precisely invoke her wrath.
Oh shit. Yeah, you won't be dodging that. Ah!
Under fire from successive blue shots, he bolted into the darkness behind him, into the Hall of Mirrors.
Guessing they missed? They had to have missed. We can't have Sojiro die. What the heck was that?
He ran for his life through the seemingly endless passage. The reason he was breathing so hard after a mere 2 meters of all-out sprinting was due to his surprise at that unknown phenomenon which exceeded the first attack, and the very real feeling that he would be dead right now if he had jumped back even a second later. He couldn't stop if he wanted to. Merciless footsteps pressured him from behind. But I'm saved! If it's here, then... Clutching at that faint hope, he ran with all his might. It was 20 meters from the entrance of the Hall of Mirrors to the lobby, through a long, narrow passage. If he could get there was any number of places he could hide. Yes! The passage opened up into a wide-open space. He'd made it to the first floor lobby. From here, he had 3 options. 1. Go downstairs into the basement. 2. Enter the maze on the first floor. 3. Go upstairs to the second floor.
I'm guessing we don't make choices in this visual novel. Well, maybe we do, but we haven't gotten to any of that yet.
Thinking that right now it didn't particularly matter which one he chose, he instinctively ran into the maze on the first floor, but... Ow! He smashed face first into a transparent barrier.
It's a mirror.
A mirror? That's right, it's annoying but fair. Neither the pursuer or the pursued have an advantage here. He heard an almost cheerful voice behind him, but there was no need to turn around. Aoko's slowly advancing form was reflected in the mirror he'd run into. Oh, and I've blockaded the first floor exit, physically, not magically. Of course, calling it a blockade may be giving it too much credit. It's more like rubble? Collapsed earth? I guess it doesn't really matter. The important thing is if you go near it, it'll fall down on your head. You better keep your distance if you don't want to be buried alive. Anxious from the approaching footsteps, he felt his way toward the wall. His eyes were set on the stairway to the second floor. He hadn't really understood what she was talking about, but he had at least been able to gather that the first floor was no good. Well, that would be convenient for me, though. It's a lot easier to clean things up officially after an accidental death. The thing behind him was unidentifiable. With light, jeering words, she slowly raised her right arm. An incongruous, mysterious pattern was engraved on her body, visible even through her clothes. It was as if the blood vessels under her skin were circulating something inhuman. Was he disgusted? Appalled? Whatever the reason, he stopped, just for a moment. His pursuer avoided his gaze. Oh, this? Usually I conceal it with an ointment, but today it's special. It's my family crest. Think of it as the proof that I'm a magus. This light is at the beginning of Snap, the bullet from before. I'm feeling good today, and if there's one thing I'm confident in, it's my ability to use magical energy efficiently. So yeah, I'd say I could do it about 30 more times. That rapid-fire barrage, I mean. She must have been in high spirits because her tone was horribly friendly. Though what she was actually saying was just plain horrible.
I didn't really follow any of that, Aoko.
You don't get it? I'm saying I have 30 shots left. If you can run away until I'm out, you win, for today anyway. For today, huh? I wonder if that means I'm going to have to go through this again tomorrow, too. He frowned.
But I have work to do.
And Alco frowned as well. Even though he was panicking, he wasn't showing a true sense of crisis. It was obvious he couldn't understand what was happening. Enough talk. Your respite is over. If you feel you haven't abused me enough, well, there's not enough time in the world for that. Just give up here. Apparently, she had prepared the relaxed speech on purpose, not so he could fruitlessly beg for his life, but to give him time to curse his killer. That was her sense of justice at work, though this time, at least, her rambling hadn't had the intended effect. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Let's begin the hunt, shall we? With a voice bereft of emotion, she stared cruelly at her prey. And, for Sojiro, the reality that he would be killed here finally sank in.
Oh no. What's going on?
That was a long fade. With ghost-like silence, it stole into the remnants of the dream that hadn't seen visitors in ages. The windless night was devoid of life. Nevertheless, something clasped its hands with a clatter and smiled a smile of satisfaction. Its delicate folded form was like a budding tulip. The gestures of this artificial flower were reflected in the cloudy mirror of the gate attendant's office, next to which hung an old rusted bulletin board. Today's visitors, 2. Today's XXXXX. Somebody had vandalized the weathered bulletin board with a single cruel graffiti. Today's XXXXX was scribbled out and replaced with today's fatal accidents. Standing in front of that long disused record chart, it thought for a moment, then altered the numbers. Today's visitors, 3. Today's fatal accidents, 1. Uh-oh. After making the alterations with its forefinger, a smile bloomed on its face. Then, it turned and started to walk toward the noise that had begun echoing from the Hall of Mirrors like a rhapsody 10 minutes prior.
I wonder who that could be. Somebody from the church, maybe? Somebody from the church, or either someone from the church or Alice.
And still, as before, the night was devoid of life.
So, fatal accidents, does that mean Sojiro got killed? He can't die, he's the main character. Or one of the main characters.
This battle was a foregone conclusion. Even if Sojiro had been the luckiest man in the world, he never had any chance of escaping. But, where did the calculations end and coincidence begin? Even Aoko, who planned this, couldn't tell. There was only 3 things she could say for sure. First, this had taken longer than she anticipated. Second, his response exceeded her expectations. And third, choosing the Hall of Mirrors had been a mistake.
Why would you choose the Hall of Mirrors? It would make it easier for someone to get away, I would think, considering it's supposed to be a maze.
Or more precisely, while the actual layout of the Hall of Mirrors made for a perfect hunting ground, seeing her own incompetence reflected back at her everywhere she looked was just a little irritating. And miss again. Ugh! The instant Aoko's arm glowed, Sojiro escaped into the stairway. A rapid-fire blue strobe light flashed in the room behind him, as his pursuer calmly moved to follow after her desperately fleeing prey.
I'm gonna kill a bitch.
Just as planned. If you didn't go that way, the feast I prepared would just go to waste. In contrast to Sojiro, Aoko ascended the stairs at a brisk walk. The reason she didn't run was to keep the distance between them constant. Since she had lacked confidence in her accuracy, the worst possible situation would be if he charged at her with the intent of going down fighting. As long as the range between them was roughly 10 meters, there was no problem. In the time it would take him to close the gap, she could fire off 10 shots, 4 of which would likely hit. But a positional relationship like the one they had before was slightly disadvantageous for her. At that distance, in the large room, there was a possibility, however slight, that he could make use of the extra space to close into melee range and turn this into a bare-handed fight. Right now, her greatest weapon was the bullets fired by her right arm. In order to make the best use of that advantage, she needed to keep her distance. If she approached him, it would only be after he was thoroughly exhausted and had given up. Would she shoot him through his foot, his back? Or would his mind be broken by this maze? Whatever the case, once he was wounded and could no longer flee, the hunt would come to an end. Sojiro, on the other hand, was fighting back the urge to scream. There was no way he could look for an exit when just running straight ahead was difficult. And hit another mirror. Ow! The corridor seemed to stretch out into the distance, but it was merely a trick of the mirrors. In a fluster, he decided to head right, and... Another mirror. Again? Leaving his forehead pressed against the mirror, he reached out with his left arm, confirmed there was no wall, and... "Oh, better watch out." He dove into the corridor on his left, barely dodging a pair of bullets. And there goes the mirrors. Hastened by the sound of approaching footsteps, he ran without thinking. A scorching smell wafted from behind his head. He had literally escaped by a hair. He was certainly lucky. Or maybe he was extraordinarily unlucky. A lucky person wouldn't be in a situation like this in the first place. It seemed the second floor of the Hall of Mirrors was shaped like an enormous whirlpool. Starting at the outer perimeter, it was one left turn after another. And, waiting at the center of it all was a dead end. The more he ran, the more he cornered himself. He was trapped in a spiral guillotine. His swallowed screams threatened to emerge as petulant grumbling. No matter what he did, he was going to die here. Even if he struggled his hardest, all it would do was extend this incomprehensible situation a few more seconds, a few more minutes. But still, he ran. No matter how many mirrored walls he smashed into, he ran. Even as stars danced in his eyes and blood poured from his head, he ran. New pain assailed him every few seconds. The more recklessly he ran, the more violently he smashed into the invisible walls. His body had already memorized this connection between running and pain, and begged him to slow down. As a result, his breath was ragged from a mere 60-meter sprint. To begin with, this was crazy no matter how he thought about it. No matter the circumstances, it was just too absurd. Surely, if he turned around, he would find Aoko waiting to apologize for taking a bad joke too far. His mind blanked out. His body, fed up by the repeated collisions, was ready to seize at any excuse to stop. A chill. Like a cold grip around his neck, he felt the touch of death. It was a sensation he knew all too well. After all, since coming to the city, he hadn't just one or two brushes with death. From the viewpoint of someone who knew nothing of the city's rules, there wasn't much difference between the current situation and, say, crossing a busy road or navigating a crowded train platform during rush hour. It wasn't like he was a newborn infant, yet to experience life or fear. It was just that the knowledge that shaped his personality had one day been suddenly thrust into an entirely alien cultural sphere. The things that were natural to the people of the city, including the societal systems that ensured safety, were all unknown dangers to him. So yes, he was used to this feeling. If he were to speak honestly, there were things he didn't like too. Unnecessary things. The world was overflowing with worthless things, all of them dangerous. To him, even the daily goods that lined the shelves in convenience stores were extraordinary tools. As civilization raised people's standards, it dulled their sense for danger. The way of the city, which valued wealth and convenience above all else, was toxic to him, who was raised in the country. And unfortunately, he didn't have the luxury of simply submitting to conveniences of the city when an accident that nobody wished for could arise easily and abruptly just from misunderstanding how to use it. It made him uneasy. Why? Why did he end up here?
Plot convenience? Ugh. He's gotta be really banged up at this point.
Ugh. It was too ironic. His hit hair to unnoticed feelings. To think they would reveal themselves only now, at death's door. That's right, unforeseen things were nothing new. Almost dying was nothing special. Safety was something acquired as compensation for payment. As long as people were alive, adversity was always waiting. Like a street lamp at night, it was only natural for the light to vanish with the dawn. The unknown weapon being fired at him without mercy brought back memories of the figure that had been reduced to cinders by that blue fire 2 nights ago. Somehow, he thought it seemed like a horse being led around by a carrot. At any rate, he lifted his head and continued running through the maze. But to what end? Though the pain in his heart was real, it didn't feel that way at all. The night sky, visible through the skylight, awash in grimy ultramarine, was totally different from the one he knew. Abruptly, he relaxed his guard and laughed in despair. It felt like something important had broken inside him. He's lost a few screws, because nothing really mattered to begin with. The only reason his legs kept moving anyway was because of Aoko's reflection. He dashed through the maze of mirrors like a mouse being chased by a cat. Then, after just 4 minutes, that strangely unreal tension ended.
Ooh, looked like that almost hit his hand.
The 9th barrage discharged right next to him. It exploded the instant it hit the wall, sending him flying across the corridor. It was, without a doubt, the closest he'd ever come to death.
Ouch!
He collapsed to the floor with a groan. Tiny needles of pain stabbed into his back. Luckily, there wasn't any blood. It seemed that he had managed to escape a serious injury. However, his body stubbornly refused to move. It wasn't like he was physically or mentally exhausted, nor was his pain bad enough to prevent him from getting up. It's just that, when he fell down, he happened to catch sight of the dark night sky through a window on the ceiling, and an immature, selfish grief passed through his mind. How unsightly. This was the last thing he'd ever see. His ragged breaths gradually regained their composure. To put it simply, he had given up on escaping, both from the footsteps of his pursuer, and perhaps from the bigger issue beneath it all. Well, maybe, if it's Aoko, being killed won't be so bad. A feeling that the human called Shizuki Sojiro should never feel leaked out. Incidentally, it may seem unbelievable, but it was the only mistake he ever made. He looked up at the night sky absent-mindedly and listened to the approaching footsteps. "Are you done running?" Aoko's voice was closer than ever. Perhaps sensing that it was finally over, she approached her fallen prey. Sojiro gazed silently at the murderer before him. Her expression was impossible to make out in the darkness of the mirrored corridor. "Well, it's fine if you don't respond. But you're really screwed up, you know that? Normally you'd at least ask why I'm trying to kill you or something." She spoke while concealing her face in the shadows. His eyes widened. Now that she mentioned it, it would have been a perfectly natural question. Though he had a vague notion that he was being killed for finding out something secret, wanting to know more was human nature. Well, he has at least got the gist of it. Yeah, that's true. He agreed with a sigh. His face was full of resignation, mixed with a lonely longing. He thought for a moment, then... "But you don't need to say anything. I don't want to hear it." His voice was quiet and mature. It was an all too dazzling answer. "Fine. Then I'm going to kill you now. You're not scared of dying?" "Of course I'm scared. It'll probably hurt a lot." Aoko's face clouded at his pouty objection. Even in this situation, he was sincere with his feelings. "Oh yeah? That's scary alright. I'd be scared too. But you'll just have to deal with it. If you want to call me a bastard, that's fine. Right now, you wouldn't be wrong."
You don't really call women bastards, though.
I'm the same as you in that sense. I'm not bound by normal morality. That's why I can even kill if I have to. Sojiro's fingers twitched at her indifference. It was as if his body, which had given up on everything, was trying to say it couldn't ignore what she had just said. "Killing is wrong. I told you already, I know that." She raised her right arm. The light from the crest lit up her face. Of course, it was the same as always. There was no sadness there, no joy. She was an ordinary girl who had thrown away her emotions. How on earth could she expect him to just deal with that? For Sojiro, who knew the normal Aoko, it was more painful than any expression she could have made. "Sorry, but can I ask you something first?" "What is it? If you're thinking of running again, I'll have to politely decline." His face slackened, and he breathed a sigh of relief. So the pain he had seen was just a misunderstanding. In the end, Aoko was Aoko. He smiled, happy to be wrong, though of course anybody else who saw him would definitely get the wrong idea. "I was too naive, thinking I'd hear out your last words. Or are you really leaving behind nothing but that smirk?" No, that's not it. It's just, isn't that your friend over there?" He pointed somewhere behind her.
Yep. I knew Alice was going to interfere.
"Huh?" What a played-out gag. She felt like this was the part where she was supposed to smack him on the head with a fan. Then again, he seemed completely serious, and it's not like this guy would know about that sort of routine in the first place. "What are you talking..." Had she been swayed by his sincerity? Almost inadvertently, Aoko turned to look where he was pointing. There.
Oh! No, that's not Alice. Creaking. What the fuck is that?
With a joyful wooden groan, it made its ominous appearance in this inorganic maze.
That is creepy. That is really fucking creepy.
A puppet? A strange humanoid figure loomed silently in the darkness. For a fleeting moment, its serene grace and beautiful craftsmanship, apparent even from a distance, bleached away the abnormality of it all.
Yep, this must be one of Toko's dolls.
Ugh! Growing, twisting, stretching. It was so bizarre that Aoko simply froze up. The thought of dodging didn't even cross her mind. Humans are blessed with both intellect and knowledge. But for that very reason, when confronted with something they've never encountered before, they... Ooh! She got fucked up. She cried out in pain. The demonic attack launched by the thing at the end of the corridor had crossed the 10-meter gap between them as if it was nothing and thrust into her back with blinding speed and precision. An anguished whimper threatened to escape her lips as she smashed into the wall, but she choked it down. At the same time, the thing that attacked her quickly began retracting its arm. Aoko! Sojiro was on his feet in an instant. He rushed over to Aoko, who was on the floor coughing, and used all his strength to help her to her feet. He was taken aback by how light she was. In his head, she had become a larger-than-life figure. When he touched her, he'd expected to feel an unmistakable strength exceeding his own. But in reality, she was just a normal girl. She couldn't have weighed more than 50 kilograms.
Sojiro, you better back the fuck up. That thing is gonna fuck your day up.
Meanwhile, some sort of mechanism was clattering as the thing reeled its hyper-articulated 10-meter arm, returning to its original shape and size.
And that's also a doll of Aoko. If you guys noticed, it looks exactly like her.
Are you okay? Stop it. How can you be making that kind of face right now? Grumbling, she shook off his hand. Her knees gave out almost immediately, but he caught her before she could fall to the floor. Hey, take it easy. So is that someone you know? He was staring at the eerily motionless figure at the other end of the corridor, which was almost done retracting its arm.
So that was the thing that wrote on the board.
Yeah, it's a friend of the one I fought before. She ran her fingers over her back as she answered. Ugh. As soon as she did, searing pain flared through her spine. Even though it hurts this much, it's just a bruise? But it was an almost flawless sneak attack. Maybe it can't land a fatal hit from that distance. No, that can't be it. There must be something I'm missing. She caught her breath while assessing the damage to her back. Before long, the pain faded and her breathing returned to normal. For now, at least, her motor functions were unaffected. That said, the truly serious damage was...
That is really fucking creepy.
Aoko, look! Shut up, I know. Blue light burned in the darkness. She gathered the magical energy generated by her breathing into her right arm. If magical energy was the fuel, then the formula was the ignition device. For Aoko, this was merely a replay of 2 nights ago. When the puppet extended its arm again, she would run the formula as fast as she could and snap out a bullet. It was a 10-meter melee battle, a cross-counter between life and death. But as long as she could secure at least a 2-second opening, she could make it. It moved. With its head down, its expression was unreadable. Range and darkness masked its age. To Aoko and Sojiro, the puppet was no different from a faceless wraith. It let out a creaking sound and raised its left arm. Where its joints rusted, its movements were somehow sluggish. The right arm it extended earlier hung limply at its side. From behind its long hair, it almost seemed like it was smiling. This time is different from before. It's coming from its left. Sojiro, move! She tackled Sojiro and brandished her right arm. At the same time, the puppet extended its left. The timing was perfect. In the span of a second, her snap hit the puppet's arm, diverted the trajectory, and exploded into its body. Yes, that's what would have happened if the all-too-important formula had been activated.
Ooh. That's right, she can't fire it anymore. She probably, exhausted her magical energy supply or something.
Ugh. She barely managed to dodge. The only reason she was able to avoid the attack despite her sorcery failing was intuition. So that's what you did. She clenched her teeth in frustration. Her thoughts raced. Should she charge? Should she flee? There was one arm remaining. It would take some time for the other to rewind. Needless to say, this was her best chance. If she was going to act, it had to be now. As long as she only had to worry about the right arm, she should be able to just barely dodge it again, close the distance, and... Vivivus insomnus solitari putris in eferos. I am alive in slumber, I am rotting alone in the ground. Hodie mea obit die, et mea natus die te obre. Today is the day I died, and was born, and now I'm coming to see you. Whatever that's supposed to mean. A crackling sound echoed through the corridor. The vaguely poetic whispering contained an ember of magical energy strong enough to be perceived by a magus. Though the song-like verse itself was Latin, it was dotted with rhymes of Gondor. Originally, they were words meant for cursing an object of hatred. However, mea anima immortalis autem mea futura nacterim... Okay, I'm gonna stop trying. Though my life is unending, my future has been killed. I am a ghost. The very definition of my existence is uncertain. I both hate you and adore you. Let us meet in a dream. The puppet was aiming them at itself. Curses give birth to curses. The victim of a curse inevitably curses their assailant, creating a vicious circle of negativity. The puppet's incantation made use of that principle. However, it was a one-man show to the end, an unprecedented power source akin to self-intoxication. Though it was almost unbelievable, it had turned the cycle of causes into a perpetual motion device. The cycle of curses, I mean, not causes. What the hell? Isn't that a little much? She abandoned the idea of mounting an all-out resistance on the spot. Instead of counterattacking, she turned tail and ran as fast as she could. What are you just standing around for? Come on! Grabbing hold of Sojro's hand, she fled deeper into the land of mirrors. Behind them, the crackling voice continued. Forsaken by those around me. We were all of us guilty. We are sinners. Welcome to my house. Sink into death. Become dust and whispers. Gouge out my missing heart. Oof. I will kill you. Well, damn. They're fucked. Alko ran through the mirrored corridor, doing her best to endure the pain in her back. Sojro, who was being dragged along by his hand, followed close behind. Are you hurt, Alko? Nah, there's just some numbness along my spine. My organs are fine, though. I don't think there's any internal bleeding. She neglected to mention her circuits were shredded, but grumbled about it inwardly. Unlike Sojro, she navigated the maze without crashing into anything. It wasn't because of her eyesight, but because she had memorized the layout of the building in advance. How can you be so sure? It's my own body. Managing it is the very basics of the basics. She answered his nervous question with an air of boredom. The corridor was gradually growing shorter with every left turn. Until just a little while ago, they had been able to run straight ahead for 30 meters at a stretch, but now they would be hitting the next corner in 15 meters or so. So, is this the same person from... Probably. I think it's the same type at least, though anybody that could use such a valuable automata disposably must be ridiculously wealthy. His brow furrowed. He was happy Alko was answering his questions, but she was using a lot of strange words. Alko, stop. This is far enough. We're a whole corner ahead. Let's rest a little. He was obviously still worried about her injuries, but she shook her head. Against a long-range opponent like that, a lead of just one corridor is meaningless. We need to put at least two between us before we can start to breathe easy. Sojro nodded. That made sense. Then, setting that aside, why did you take me with you? You idiot! It's because I didn't want to let you get away. She glared sullenly at her prey. It was like he had already forgotten she was trying to kill him. She's gonna try to kill him again. They rounded yet another corner, and finally, their feet began to slow. Alko touched her hand to her back while she caught her breath. Though she had insisted she was fine earlier, apparently that was just bravado. Somehow, even the normally oblivious Sojro could tell. He stood behind her, arms crossed, and used this chance to try to puzzle out the situation in his own way. There's some secret world of magus, or magi, and servants, and magic, and all that. Try explaining that to someone like Sojro, who can't even really understand the normal world. Try explaining to him a secret world. I mean, that'll just confuse him even more. First, he was nearly killed by Aozaki Alko. Though he was saved at the last second, the person who interfered was the bizarre stretchy-armed human Alko had burned up 2 nights ago. He hadn't gotten a good look, but he was pretty sure she was a girl. Or looked like a girl. Then, Alko had suffered some kind of injury to her back from the girl's attack and staged a temporary retreat. And though she had grabbed his hand and brought him along, she said it was just to keep him from escaping. In short. Wait, you're still planning on killing me? Of course, I could fight off 2 of those things and still have more than enough left over for you. Oh, that's complete bullshit. You couldn't even fend that off. You had to run. Despite her ruthless reply, even an untrained eye could see she was straining herself. Since she had no right to be so optimistic, the damage to her body wasn't something she could ignore. But the fury burning in her eyes rejected that. My circuits are shortening out all over the place, which means that right arm must jam the activation of the formula by forcing them to cross. Though by all rights she should be trembling in fear, right now her fists were quivering with rage. Formula jamming was a technique that was only effective against total beginners. Oh, okay, so she wasn't out of mana, she just had her spell canceled out. Against someone like her roommate, the instant the arm made contact, it would have been rebounded and burned up the attacker's circuits instead. Connecting your circuits to another Magus like that was the same as serving up your own heart on a platter. In a battle between superior magi, it would be completely useless. And yet, the enemy was equipped with such a superfluous function. Combined with the attacks throughout the administered land of Misaki these last few weeks, there was only one conclusion. The enemy was showing their evaluation of the girl who had only officially stepped forward as a Magus just 2 days prior. In short, they were looking down on her. They might be an enemy, but they're nothing if not meticulous. Though she was still angry, her unsettled emotions began to cool. Rather than a 17-year-old girl, she had the face of a far-sighted hunter. Somehow, it seems like you were taking this more seriously than you were when you were hunting me. Well, of course, I was just toying with you back then. He didn't know if he should be happy or sad. There's so much I don't understand. I don't even know where to start, but there's one thing I want to ask. Aoko stared straight ahead without acknowledging him. The silence was heavy, shadows cloyed at them like thread. Still, even being treated like nothing, Sojiro didn't back down. Will you kill her too, Aoko? A hush fell over them, as if it had been dragged out of the darkness itself. No reply. The only sound in the dim corridor was their breathing. You know, you're giving that thing a lot of time to catch up. The boy who asked of Sin, and the witch who ignored him. After several frozen seconds. That's like your catchphrase, isn't it? She muttered without inflection. It wasn't clear if her sigh was one of resignation or contempt. A catch what now? I was talking to myself, just forget about it. But you should know, that thing isn't a human. It may seem unbelievable, but it's a puppet that moves by its own will. Both this one and the one from before. Sojiro nodded frankly. Far from doubting her story, he seemed to have accepted it wholeheartedly. I can't help but feel you're taking this a little too well. Oh, not at all. It's just that I'm so lost right now that I've decided not to think too hard about any of it. Though frankly, that puppet is nothing special. Huh? What? Wait, you're saying you've actually seen an autonomous puppet before? What do you mean? Aren't all puppets like that in the city? What? She just barely restrained an impulse to collapse to her knees. So that's what it was. This godlike idiot was that sort of guy. As a transfer student from deep in the mountains, he was like a naturally protected species. His outlandish lack of common sense meant that to him. Everything he saw was bizarre. If the lumps of iron called cars moved, it wouldn't be strange for him to think that puppets moved too. Then, perhaps, what he saw 2 nights ago hadn't been anything special at all. Maybe he thought it was just a part of the normal scenery of the city, not even worth talking about. So there was really no reason to kill him. You win. Really, I'm impressed you made it this far. I'd like to get a look inside your head someday. No wonder there was something off about the way you reacted when I attacked you. Normally you'd call me a ghost or monster, but I guess for you it was just another thing that exists, huh? Somehow, I feel like the idiot here. Just for a moment, the tension drained out of her face. Right, if that was the case, there might have been a way to resolve this peacefully, without anybody getting hurt. But it was already too late. In life, do-overs did not exist. They must not exist. The situation had spiraled out of control over a trivial mistake and selfish assumptions, but now that things had come this far, she had no choice but to protect her secret with her own hands. Oh, so she's still going to kill him. Great. Even if there had been another, ideal option, that door was long shut. In the end, human relationships were spun out of mutual misconceptions. A beautiful tapestry woven from misthreaded intentions. I'm very curious as to where this is going now. Maybe she's just gonna put off killing him. And so, their brief respite drew to a close. Aozaki Aoko and Shizuki Sojiro. The first idle conversations they had since the day they met ended not by their own feelings, but the intrusion of rasping whispers from around the corner. Yep, it caught up to you, dumbass. Good idea, just, stand there and wait for it. Nobody remembers my funeral. Nobody's left to mourn me. From the beginning we were all mistaken. Life is naught but pain. Somebody save me. Though it was not yet directly visible, its image was reflected in the parallel mirrors. Time to wrap this up. It's almost close enough to... Huh?
What is that? Looks like she copied your attack.
The light was a bloody, grudge-filled red, quite unlike Alko's vivid blue. Gonder shots?
Oh, so it's, it's Tosca's attack.
Light flashed faster than any arm. But in that instant, she was able to clearly confirm the enemy's form. Her cooled emotions had also reignited. You're such a damn pest. Channeling all of her pent-up anger and rage, she brandished her right arm. The fog that appeared was not sorcery, but a barrier of raw magical energy. It was like using 3 whole buckets of gasoline to build a wall to reduce the power of a single incoming arrow. Of course, the puppet's arm would have pierced through it like it was nothing. The only reason it worked was precisely because the attack was a curse without true form. It was a colossal wave of magical energy, but right now she had no other way to protect herself. The problem was, she was the only one protected. Sojiro! Sojiro held his hand over his mouth. Though the curse had weakened enough that she didn't even feel it, it was still too much for somebody who wasn't a Magus. As if it understood that, the puppet shifted its gaze from Alko to the unexpected human behind her. Stop it! He's not involved in this! Enraged, she brandished her arm again. Blue phosphorescence became a barrier to defend against the Gonder for another scant few seconds. Seizing the opportunity, the puppet aimed its right arm at Alko's face just as she formed the wall, and... Looks like I'm a part of this after all, so let's get out of here. Just like that, Sojiro scooped her up in his arms before the deadly rocket could fire. Huh? Where he found the strength was a mystery, but he turned his back on the puppet and took off running. His movements were like a nimble sprinter or a deer leaping from rock to rock in the mountains, rounding 2 corners, ignoring Alko's clear displeasure. He finally stopped and set her down close to the center of the 2nd floor. Alright, we should be able to rest a little here. He panted, trying to catch his breath. No matter how light she was, he had run all this way with another person in his arms. Alko looked up at him in confusion. If you had this sort of stamina, then why? It didn't make any sense. If he was strong enough to carry her now, then he should have been able to stand up again and escape when she had him cornered earlier. Oh, it's because back then I had given up. He didn't sugarcoat it at all. Right now, he was fighting for his life. Naturally, his usual absent-mindedness had receded. Okay, but why? I don't really remember. Although he looked away as if he didn't want to say it, he answered honestly. Somehow, Alko found it a little painful. More importantly, I feel really sick all of a sudden. Is it because of that red light? Yeah, it was a type of sorcery called a Gonder shot. It's a Scandinavian curse. I'm fine since I have circuits, but for someone like you with no way to resist it, it looks like the effect is instantaneous. So I guess if Shiro had been hit by it, he would just have felt slightly ill? That's not very threatening. Oh, it doesn't affect you? That's good. Then the only danger is from those arms. Seeing his relief, she grit her teeth and bit her tongue. Yelling at him here would be useless anyway. And most of all, she felt that if she said what was bothering her out loud, none of it would matter anymore. That's right, I just need to watch out for those and I'll be fine. That thing's not so tough after all. It didn't seem like she was lying. Under normal circumstances, beating that thing wouldn't be a problem. But due to her shameful lack of awareness, her circuits had been tampered with, making her even less impressive than her opponent. Right now, she had no way of attacking. All she could do was wait for her opponent to run out of magical energy, which, thanks to that perpetual curse engine, would never happen. The chase wouldn't end until one of them died. It's exactly the same position I had Sojiro in earlier, she noted sardonically. She glanced at her right arm. To think that she'd be in this mess even though her magical energy reserves were still more than half full. It must have been her punishment for hunting Sojiro with such relish. What a joke. I guess there's a god after all. She griped under her breath and switched her train of thought. On the one hand, she had fuel but couldn't use it. On the other, that killing machine would chase her forever with its inexhaustible power source. In which case, the course of action she should take was all too clear. She just needed to go back to normal. Alko? Sorry, my mind was somewhere else. Let's see. Ah, found it. Hey, Sojiro, see that side passage over there? Huh? No matter how he looked, all he saw was a wall. To begin with, this floor only had left turned, and she was pointing to the right. There's a way back down to the first floor at the very center of the maze, but you can't use it because I destroyed it. There's a nasty little trick here, though. If you look closely, there's actually a right turn. It's a hidden path reserved for the best of the best. From there, you can find a shortcut downstairs. It's a little selfish, but I want you to go that way on your own. She turned her back on him and started walking away from the escape route and down the long corridor toward the pursuing puppet. Since that thing is indiscriminate, I have to destroy it here. It's okay if a Magus fights another Magus, but recklessly dragging normal people into the fray is forbidden. I'm its objective, so no matter what happens, you should be fine, right? If she won, the puppet would be destroyed. If she lost, its mission would be complete and it would shut down. Either way, as long as they parted ways here, Sojiro could stay out of it and survive. That's what she was saying. Her manner was detached, like it was somebody else's problem. With a little luck, you'll make it all the way out. So, see you tomorrow.
Wow, that was abrupt.
Even Sojiro could tell she was just bluffing. But by the time he had thought to stop her, she had already disappeared around the corner.
Well then, I guess Sojiro is just gonna leave.
Well then. I'm royally screwed, huh? Aoko grumbled to herself.
Something tells me Sojiro isn't just gonna leave. He's gonna, like, come in at the last minute, and he's probably gonna, like, punch it or something, I guess. I don't know. Because I've kind of spoiled myself to some of the things he does later in the game, and he's not a Magus, but he does have, like, I guess, good physical strength, or physical ability. The difference in quality between this puppet and the one she defeated 2 days ago was staggering. An auto-incanting perpetual motion engine was rare enough, but on top of that it had those ridiculous extending arms and Gondor-projecting crystal eyes. If it were put to market, it would net 100 million yen easily. However, that was only considering its value as an antique. In an actual battle, it would be better to mobilize a cheaper familiar more suitable for fighting. To use such a high-class good as a tool for murder, its master must have been uncommonly twisted. Oh, so there's no translation for this. Vivimus insumus solitari potris in infernus, hodie me olblet die et me natos die te arbore.
Latin words. Here it comes. Like a crackling music box, the automaton that animated itself with curses approaches. Aoko stood at the end of the 10-meter corridor and waited impatiently for it to make its appearance. She hadn't decided to settle things here so that Sojiro could get away, quite the contrary. She had simply determined that in her current state, her own escape was impossible. Even assuming she was able to by some miracle make it out of the Hall of Mirrors, that would be the end of it. With nothing to buffer the distance between her and the puppet, she would be overtaken and skewered in a heartbeat. As long as her sorcery was sealed off, she was trapped. So, she had decided to fight here. Though the conditions were unfavorable, they were at least fair. There was nowhere for her to run in this cramped corridor, but at the same time, the puppet couldn't demonstrate its full speed either. It was the mechanism's only flaw. Like all the automata of the era, it was only capable of gradual acceleration and deceleration. Set. She activated her frayed circuits. Her blood flow and magical energy supply were unstable. Casting a spell like this would be nearly impossible. The most she could do was crudely harden her right arm by treating it with magical energy, turning it into a slender melee weapon somewhere between a hammer and a bat. It wasn't much, but it was her only option. Then, all that was left was the battle plan. Her weapon had been chosen for her, so she just had to figure out how best to use it. The obvious strategy was to conceal herself using the mirrors, then strike from the puppet's blind spot, but that was impossible, because that puppet had no sense of sight. It perceived the world not through visual information, but through the topography of its surroundings. The principle was the same as the bat's echolation. By emitting high-frequency noise engaging the response, it could see even in total darkness. In short, that incantation was also acting as a sensor. To the puppet, these mirrored walls were nothing more than ordinary glass. Trying to launch a sneak attack was an exercise in futility. The closer it gets, the better it can sense me, really. Long-range sniping would be nice right now, especially if it could use fin shots. Gondor was a simple, versatile curse that originated in Scandinavia. Those who mastered it could deteriorate an opponent's health with a mere point of a finger. As a single-action sorcery, normally its effects were limited to causing illness. However, there was a forbidden technique buried deep within the art of Gondor. Fin shot, a killing curse that would stop the heart of any who received it.
So it's like the evolved form of Gondor.
Ugh. Electricity shot through her nerves from the wound on her back. A weaponless child, versus an automaton that could inflict instant death. It was painfully obvious that she was the one who would be killed here, when she thought about how she had almost no chance of making it out of this situation alive. What the hell is that? Her blood ran cold. She quietly endured the usual hallucination with all her might, clenching her teeth to keep them from chattering. But she had the distinct feeling that something was slithering its fingers around the nape of her neck. The specter behind her laughed. That alone had her on the verge of running for her life. But to make it even worse, her mental stimulations of the battle gave her a 20% chance of dying in the next 5 seconds. 2 times. Sometimes her stimulations were more realistic than reality. 2 times over 10 battles. She couldn't shake the image. The vision of her own corpse seemed almost real. She saw herself dead by that puppet's curse. Her eyeballs bulging out like pufferfishes, blood leaking from her nose and ears and mouth. 2 times, 2 times, 2 times. Even once would have been unbearable, but dying twice was enough to drive her mad. But she reined in her buckling heart. With deep breaths, she stared back at her reflection in the mirror. Remember that white night half a year ago. Compared to her ordeal at the Koenji mansion, this was nothing. Against the Wandersnatch, the hound of white roses that appeared in deep fog, she had been killed 100 times in 10 fights. Whatever that means. Me amina in mortalis, auta me futura nakata arum, mana sum, anime definir abigos est. The somber curse brought her back to reality. It was only about 10 meters away now. The puppet rounded the corner across from her. That is some fucking nightmare fuel right there. Just look at its eye. Jesus Christ. Both their figures were obscured by shadows. Time to die, bitch. It didn't waste any time. Without warning, it launched a barrage of Gondor and... Predicting the attack, Aoko erased it with a fog of magical energy. The thick fog would disperse after a few seconds, taking advantage of that opening. Come on! The flexible lance flew toward Aoko's face. Bingo! The lethal weapon grazed past the side of her head. Since she had experienced its movement patterns earlier, she was able to just barely dodge the attack launched from her blind spot. Things would be different with a puppeteer pulling the strings, but the functions of a self-regulating automaton were limited. As long as it was simply a killing machine following a template that called for specific attacks according to the situation, she could handle it. She had bet her fate on that. Now's my chance. She charged at the puppet before it could retract its arm. It was a 1 in a million gamble, but she seized at it with all her might. The scales of victory tipped in her favor. The 2 deaths she predicted earlier were centered around 2 distinct possibilities. The first was if it used this opportunity to launch a fin shot. And it probably will. Or do that. And the second? The second was if, like this, the puppet's attack pattern grossly exceeded her expectations. Instantaneous mass transfer. Or maybe transportation. Not a second after she dodged the puppet's spear-like arm, an unidentified weight smashed into her abdomen. Ooh, I guess she didn't predict that. Hit! The head-on collision with its shoulder felt like getting hit by a rocket. But where on earth had the thrust come from? It shouldn't have the ability to launch itself like that. Though her consciousness flickered from the pain, she saw through the attack immediately. It wasn't thrust, but traction? That was the secret. Instead of returning to the puppet, the arm had launched itself in the wall and drawn the puppet to it. It can do that? She swallowed her shock and desperately tried to regain her balance. Her abdomen and diaphragm had suffered a heavy blow. Her hand was reeling from the impact, but the puppet was surprisingly light. Thanks to that, she hadn't suffered any serious damage to her bones or organs, and she had only had the wind knocked out of her. She was flustered, but deep down she was still composed. 2 seconds would have been enough to recover. Except that was wrong. It would take 2 seconds just to straighten herself out. Damn it, pull yourself together, Aoko. You're fine. You're just a little woozy and disoriented, that's all. You can worry about your breathing and vision later. For now, just focus on getting your body... Intellect was unnecessary. Pity, I guess that's supposed to be pity. Pity was a burden. Oh, our essence was strife. Rationality was an afterthought. The source of pain was the brain. A distorted driving noise emanated from above her head. Move, legs, but which way should I? It felt like death. Grant us salvation, grant us salvation, grant us salvation. She was close enough to reach out and touch it. Likewise, it was close enough to reach out and kill her. Which meant, there's a dead angle. Acting on sheer instinct, she rolled to the puppet's right. Its arm was still embedded in the wall, so naturally it couldn't attack from that side. Sure of her judgment, her temporary vertigo vanished. Cast aside justice, put pity to rest. We are ravenous beasts. That life is but ornamentation. Throw your intelligence away. She came out of her roll and looked up, ready to strike. Huh?
And it predicted her movements, I guess?
In that instant, her own face was reflected back at her, inside this maze of mirrors.
Wait a minute, is this the first time she noticed that this puppet looks exactly like her?
We are already dead.
What the hell did it do? Did it self-destruct? Ooh. Oh, shit. She's dead.
The light was remarkably vivid. Claw-like lacerations scarred the walls. It must have been the puppet's trump card. She just barely managed to survive it by using a primitive counterspell that increased the density of the magical energy inside her body. This! A puppet that looked exactly like her. A powerful curse that went beyond merely stopping hearts and could even damage physical matter. It was abnormal no matter how she looked at it, but she didn't have any time to worry about that right now. This was her chance to counterattack. As long as its arm was still stuck, it would be off balance. All she had to do was land a kick on its defenseless body, but instead, her knees gave out and she fell to the floor. I'm alive in slumber. I'm rotting alone in the ground. Today is the day I died and was born. Now I'm coming to see you. She suddenly felt nauseous and lightheaded. An unbelievable chill ran through her body. Damn it. It was leaking curses this whole time. She noticed only too late. The puppet's surroundings were engulfed in a maelstrom of maledictation. The cursed poem that animated it also served as a self-defense mechanism that would bring sickness to any who approached. She had been continuously exposed to it ever since the puppet charged at her. Even with magic circuits, her physical condition was deteriorating just like Sodro's had. Lazily, she forced her collapsing body to roll away. It can't end here. She fled from the cursed languor with every ounce of energy she could muster. However, it wasn't a curse-born anemia she was suffering from, but a drop in blood pressure from her predicament. The positioning was perfect. In front of her, the automaton that shared her face raised its left arm like an archer notching an arrow. The lethal weapon shot unerringly toward her heart. But, just before it hit, "Look out!" A voice without a trace of panic cried out and yanked her out of the way.
Yep, I knew Sodro was going to intervene.
Once again, the extendable arm skimmed through empty space. Though the puppet quickly retracted it, Sodro took advantage of that slight opening and grabbed Alco's hand and ran as fast as his legs would carry him.
So I guess we're not actually going to finish this thing off. We're just going to keep running from it, then fighting it again. He dashed through the corridors haphazardly, only stopping when he had put enough distance between them and the puppet. So, I thought about it. For some reason, the girl he'd saved looked angry instead of grateful. Still, he plowed ahead with the witty excuse he'd racked his brain to come up with. As it turns out, I'm going to be pretty busy tomorrow. He trailed off there, but the implication was clear, so why don't we finish up our business today? Honestly, it was more awkward than anything. Alco didn't respond. She really was furious. It had nothing to do with the fact that she couldn't understand how his mind worked. Nor was it because he came back even after she went to the trouble of letting him go. It wasn't even because she was annoyed at how he was spouting off inane lines like always. No, it was all because of that single moment. When he grabbed her hand, her mind went blank and she was completely at his mercy. To her, that alone was unforgivable. And so, "Are you insane?" She lashed out at him. "Or maybe you actually want to die. You're just a target to me, you know. You're not going to win me over. Saving my life doesn't change anything." He nodded sagely. "Yeah, you're not that nice. Tonight really rubbed that in." Yeah, he didn't really realize that before, since he's completely oblivious, but I think having somebody try to kill you would definitely
hammer that in. Somehow, she was a little offended. Well, it's because you're such a soon, so I don't know why you're offended. That's naturally how you are, I guess. But you're wrong. That thing isn't just after you. I think it wants to kill me, too. Her sharp glare said she didn't buy it. Hear me out. Remember the entrance on the first floor? That long, narrow passage? For some reason, when I got down there, it was blocked off. I couldn't escape if I wanted to, so I had no choice but to come back. Her eyes widened ever so slightly, not out of surprise, but of admiration for the enemy's thoroughness. Plus, it was definitely treating me as an enemy earlier. I could tell by the way it stared at me. Well, it had happened all so fast that I didn't really get a good look at it, but I know it was terrifying. You should be careful too. I'm sure it has a really scary face. We've pretty much figured that out by now. Yeah, thanks. You're welcome. Anyway, I can't pretend this isn't my problem anymore. Because no matter which one of you wins, I'll be killed, won't I? That's right. If it's gone as far as blocking off the exits, it'll probably eliminate any witnesses too. That's what I would do. I thought so. But see, I don't want to be killed by that thing. Huh? I want to be killed by you. His words... Is that what he's about to say? His words were firm and decisive, almost encouraging. I want to be killed by a beautiful woman like you. By soon-soons. She looked up at him. And she finally noticed. His face was even paler than before. Hey, wait a minute. Are you sure you're okay? Well, I'm better off than if I'd drunk a whole bottle of soy sauce. He tried to lighten the mood with a joke, but there was no denying the fact that his forehead was soaked with greasy sweat. It must be because he got close to the puppet when he saved me. There was no way he would be okay after barging straight into a curse that even made her nauseous. She gnawed on her lip, frustrated by her own lack of foresight. He was always so absent-minded that she never even considered the possibility that he would do something so outrageous. Why didn't you just hide downstairs somewhere? Wouldn't that have been safer? She really couldn't understand him. You're one to talk. But hey, there's no time to stand around and chat. It'll be catching up to us soon. He was looking toward the end of the corridor. The crackling notes of a music box had begun to drift from deep within that mirror-lined darkness. Back on the first floor, I was thinking, even if you lose, I'll still be killed by that thing, in which case, it's in my best interest to do something about it. What are you getting at? We have to work together. She asked a question she already knew the answer to. It was to test the extent of his resolve. If he backed down, if he wavered even for a moment, she would kill him where he stood. A proposal. I help you take that thing out, and in return, you let me go. Didn't I already tell you? Helping me won't change my mind. And what could you even do? I'm sure you'll think of something. That's your specialty, right? It was, after all, the commander's job to make the best use of their subordinates. Besides, asking somebody who can't grasp the situation and doesn't know the difference in ability between himself and his enemy what he can do is pointless, he said, puffing out his chest. He was right, of course. The only one who knew what both he and that automaton were capable of was her. All he could do was try his best to do whatever she told him to do. In other words, he had given up on thinking, but at the same time, it meant that he had accepted his own helplessness and decided to trust her wholeheartedly. So, you're saying you'll follow my instructions to the letter? That's right, and I want you to know that I'm not doing this out of a sense of duty or obligation. It's just that neither of us has a chance on our own, so it's better if we work together. It isn't goodwill or kindness. Think of it as a transaction. His eyes sparkled. It was bartering in its purest form. Seriously? He must have learned this from that idiot Tobimaro. Though she'd never show it, she could almost smile. She'd been completely had, true, but apparently there were times in this world when defeat didn't taste so bad. Honest pay for honest work, huh? Makes sense. Yeah, I hate to say it, but... After a moment, her shoulders relaxed and she breathed a sigh of relief. Then, as if all her worries had left her, a vaguely wicked smile spread over her face. That suits me just fine. She threw the trust he had shown her right back at him. So, I guess that's how they're going to team up now. I look forward to this. I don't know what Sojiro is capable of, but I guess we'll find out. I'm not going to lie. What I need you to do will probably be pretty tough. With that, Aoko had quietly started running, doing her best to muffle the sound of her footsteps. Only Sojiro remained behind at the center of the whirlpool on the second floor. To tell the truth, I still have an ace up my sleeve. Even I think it's overkill, but well, you were late getting here and I got a little carried away. It's something you were planning to use on me? She cheerily answered yes. Then she went on to explain her final trump card to Sojiro, who was tilting his head in confusion. Oh hey, she actually did make a map. I engraved a bunch of ignition formulas on the support posts in the basement. By triggering one of them on the central pillar, it'll start a chain reaction that activates the rest. And since I made them before my circuits were jammed, as long as I inject my magical energy, they should still, well, they'll go off. So she's gonna make the building collapse. Great. The fact that she was avoiding putting it into concrete terms was a little unsettling. Oko, what do you mean go off? Could you please confess as clearly and simply as possible just how much you're intending to blow up? What exactly am I getting myself into here? Well, it was just insurance, see? I figured if I ever lost track of you while we were playing cat and mouse, all I had to do was blow you up along with the building, that's all. Wow, that's a little bit overkill. She laughed in embarrassment and scratched her head. It's always best to be thorough, right? That's too thorough, no matter how you look at it. In the face of such cruelty, he forgot himself and protested from the bottom of his heart. And then she probably slapped him. What's the big deal? Thanks to that, we have a way to fight back now, so it's fine, right? She dashed through the corridors at full speed, grumbling something that would have rendered her cooperation with Sojiro null and void if he'd been around to hear her say it. The strategy was simple. Aoko would take the hidden passage on the right and make her way down to the basement while avoiding the puppet. Then, when she arrived at the central pillar, she would inject her magical energy into the formula and escape. Once the formula activated, it would take at least a minute for the breakdown to spread through the entire hall of mirrors, and another minute after that for the building to collapse. It would be a tight schedule, but since she had memorized the maze's layout, she should just barely be able to make it out. What's Sojiro supposed to do, just distract her? Distract the puppet? She figured the barrier the puppet had placed over the entrance would be blown away by the successive explosions from the pillars. But, even if it was stronger than she had anticipated, there was no way it could hold up once the building itself began to bend. As long as she could activate the formulas in the basement, Sojiro's escape would be assured. Which left the most important part. That automaton was at a disadvantage in this obstacle-ridden hall of mirrors, and couldn't demonstrate its full speed. If it was near the center of the second floor when the destruction started, it would be swept up in the collapse and reduced to scrap. In which case, the problem was keeping it there until she could make it to the basement. I'm counting on you, Sojiro. Just keep it busy for 3 minutes or so and I'll be fine. Oh, so he is supposed to distract it. He's gonna die, you know, like he's not gonna be able to outlast that. If he could keep its attention until she could activate the formulas, that would be perfect. Failing that, if he could at least lure it down to the first floor lobby, the plan would go off without a hitch. She knew full well how much danger she was putting him in, but given how long he was able to run away from her, his luck and leg strength were nothing to sneeze at. Well, that's true. He could probably outrun it. Yeah, as long as it's just running away, then maybe he'll actually be able to pull it off. But wait, doesn't the automaton have, like, incredible speed, though? Couldn't it just easily catch up with him? As she ran through the hidden passage in the maze, Aoko inadvertently found herself pinning her hopes on Sojiro. But I'm just an average guy. On the other hand, with no way to hear what Aoko was saying, Sojiro was preparing for another frantic chase. He used his own special method to still his pounding heart. The important thing was that he stay calm. The strategy itself was simple and easy to execute. Aoko's instructions had been short and to the point. You'll want to keep a distance of around 10 meters between you and loop around 3 or 4 times as slowly as you can. Keep track of the hidden passages by counting the panes. From here, they're at the 6th, 3rd, 7th, and 2nd, counterclockwise. If you use those, you shouldn't be in too much danger. In short, it was a circular marathon. As long as he stayed far enough away that it only attacked with its arms, but close enough that it could keep up, it should keep chasing him around indefinitely. Still, even if it was a straightforward job, he was putting his life on the line as bait. And on top of that, there was that ridiculous bit at the end about running as fast as he could to the exit when the building started to shake. This isn't just pretty tough, Aoko. It's downright impossible. Nervously, he stuck his head out around the corridor. The sound of the music box drifted from the other end of the corridor. First things first, he had to get its attention. After that, he would duck through the shortcut on the right and start this loop-shaped game of tag. It's here, he readied himself. Just a little bit closer now. Dreading the attack that could come at any moment, he went over Aoko's instructions again in his head, but... Huh? Now that he thought about it, Where was that first hidden passage again? Was it the third pane? The sixth? The ninth? Yeah, it's pretty hard to remember all that. I gotta cut him some slack. No, none of it sounded right. He'd had it down pat just a second ago, but now his head was swimming, and suddenly, he realized that the pressure from his pursuer had started to move away, noisily and with alarming speed.
What in the oh my god, what is that? It turned into a spider. What?
There was no words to describe what he saw. The puppet, which until then had taken the form of a beautiful girl, abruptly underwent a bizarre transformation, and turned back to follow the true target downstairs.
Well, so much for that.
Hey, wait, that's not good, he muttered at a loss. There wasn't even time to regret his failure. The puppet had already vanished without it. I'll help you out, so please let me go. He said that, but in the end he hadn't been able to do anything. So, what now? Alone again, he worriedly addressed the darkness, waiting for an answer from Aoko that would never come.
Good job, Sojiro, you just killed her.
At the same time, as she arrived at the first floor lobby, Aoko accepted what had happened. There was no need to strain her ears. Even at the height of its glory, the attraction had never known a sound like the one echoing through it now. It was a hopeless noise, like a horde of monstrous hedgehogs scraping away at the mirrors as they closed in. That's slacker. 3 minutes? That wasn't even 10 seconds. He called that buying her time? Considering the miracle he'd pulled off running away from her, she'd expected better. Multiple footsteps, so it switched to a multi-like formation, huh? Sound reverberated from several sources. If she had to guess, she'd say it was a giant six-legged spider tearing through the corridors.
Oh god, now it's even more horrifying.
It was no wonder that the enemy's movement speed was incomparable to before. The perception of the surroundings through echolation was particularly useful in the darkness. Compared to humans, who relied on sight, the automaton was several times more adept at navigating the mirrored labyrinth. The only reason it hadn't been able to catch up earlier was because two-legged locomotion didn't suit it. However, with the stability provided by numerous legs, its speed would far exceed that of any man.
Yep, so even Sojiro couldn't distract it. You wouldn't be able to outrun that.
What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Her thoughts flew into disarray as she tried to formulate a new plan on the fly. The only thing she knew for sure was that the outcome of this battle would be decided by her next move. If she kept standing here, she would be overtaken in a matter of seconds. Even in her current condition, the barrier blocking the entrance would be easy enough to neutralize. All she had to do was disrupt the magical energy that formed it. She wouldn't even need to cast a spell. But she could only keep running at full speed for a little over 3 minutes. In a contest of stamina, the puppet would win, no questions asked. The way she saw it, she had 3 choices. 1, she could escape outside through the exit in front of her. 2, she could hide in the maze on the first floor, which was more complicated than the one on the second. 3, she could descend into the basement and get cornered by the puppet like a rat in a trap. As if I even have to think about it, she made her decision in a flash, her frozen legs filled with a renewed vigor. Above, the storm was already approaching. So she's gonna go down to the basement, I guess. And so, strengthening her resolve, she turned and ran to the darkness below.
Let's blow up the building. Blow this thing up with it. This monstrosity shouldn't exist. Die, monster! You don't belong in this world.
No matter what, a finale is always flashy. The stage is set for the Mirror Castle's final scene. In attendance tonight are 2 people and a puppet. The girl magician descended below the earth to the very heart of the castle, pursued into the depths of the demonic dungeon by an autonomous antique. After a minute, a faint blue electric charge ran through the castle. Of course, the main pillar at the deepest part of the basement wasn't actually supporting the floors above. It was merely a symbol she had just struck with her fist, filled to the brim with magical energy. With a single blow, the castle of mirrors would crumble. She had thrown her punch with that image in mind, and in a few seconds it would become a reality. It was a straightforward ignition sorcery, designed to compress and release the magical energy engraved in the pillars all over the castle, in its very foundation. By using electricity as the switch, the activation was nearly simultaneous.
Sojiro, I think it's time to leave. Yep, that should be your cue to get the fuck out.
Gently, swiftly, the hammer of death swung down on the castle of dreams that had obstinately rejected destruction for 2 years. It was an almost joyous sound. The castle of mirrors, which had laid lifeless and abandoned for so long, began its final greatest show. Aoko's magical energy became an electrical charge, activating the formulas inscribed on the supports one after another, starting a chain reaction that would tear the building apart. Thanks for everything. You can rest now. Though you were even more beat up than I thought. At this rate, I don't even know if you'll hold out for a whole minute. The central plaza in the basement. Aoko struggled to control her breathing as she ran her crest at full tilt. She wrapped her arms in a blue light, fully aware she couldn't cast any spells.
Uh-oh. No exit, bitch.
Breath, once lost, was not so easily found. The center of the basement. She had managed to arrive at the central pillar without ever showing her back to the enemy. It was a 13-second 100-meter dash, a new personal best. She spurred on her struggling heart, fully aware what fate awaited her. If I go in, I'll be followed. If I go down, I won't be able to escape. It's only natural, thinking I could just run away until the end was selfish. She apologized to her silent pursuer. There was only a minute left until the castle collapsed completely. As long as they stayed here, they would both be crushed beneath the rubble. Of course, that worked out just fine for the puppet. Surviving wasn't an issue for something that had no life. Its sole desire was to kill its target, Aozaki Aoko. Yes, to put it simply, it was the enemy who was prepared for death all along. She resented her lack of resolve. It wasn't like her to turn tail and run from an opponent who was willing to put their own life on the line. I am alive in slumber. I am rotting alone in the ground. Today is the day I died and was born. Now I am coming to see you. Isn't that just self-destruction? Between the six-legged movement and the fin shots, the magical energy it's getting from the curses can't keep up. Indeed, though it was called perpetual motion, that was only true if the expenditure of magical energy was kept under control. By using so many functions at once, the puppet's fuel tank would empty faster than it refilled, until eventually it wouldn't even have enough energy to run the curses that powered it. It would exhaust everything it had been given for the sake of fulfilling its objective. That was the pride of a utensil, which beings endowed with intelligence could never hope to understand. A man who touched the resolve of a beast born to run would only get burned. It's such a waste. I thought only my sister was capable of something this insane, but I guess there are people like this everywhere. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, it's probably your sister. However, Aoko didn't have the slightest intention of going down with her opponent. She was done reflecting. She'd paid her respects. There was no time to lose. Let's do this, right here, right now. I'll pay back everything you've given me, with interest. The power she'd accumulated exploded through her right leg. She was aiming at just one thing, a direct frontal assault. In turn, the enemy responded with a curse to gouge out her chest. It was a full-power heartbreaker, prepared without any fear of burning out. Ugh! The instant she saw it, Aoko kicked the floor. Her body danced aside, long hair streaming in the wind. Her! The excessive lateral movement nearly threw her off balance, but she quickly swung her arms and righted herself before she fell. A shot grazed her, sending a burst of white-hot fire through her left shoulder. But it was fine. If it meant avoiding a direct hit from a fin shot, she'd take it. Snap! Ooh. There goes your arm. It took her half a second to recover from the pain and loss of balance. As soon as she raised her head, she deflected the incoming attack with a fistful of magical energy. Now! If the puppet had any mind of its own, it would have surely widened its eyes. The fact that she had never stopped her charge while pulling off this series of moves was nothing short of admirable, a testament to her will. Crack! Her reaction was instantaneous. She wasn't strong enough to deflect the attack completely, merely alter its course, but it was enough. The second arm whiffed harmlessly through her hair. Everything was a mistake. I should have never been born. Somebody, redeem me, redeem me, redeem me, redeem me, redeem me, redeem me. The cursed incantation stole away at her spirit. Ha. Was it composure? Wrath? Whatever drove her, she easily resisted that all too fragile defensive function and... Falcon kick! Damn. And she's done. Gleether! Filling her right leg with magical energy, she launched the puppet into the air with all her might.
And puppet's done. It's dead.
It was lighter than she expected. No, not just light, but frail. An automaton's weight was determined by its internal structure, that is, the size of its power source. There was no doubt that the musical engine that drove this particular automaton was an excellent one, but ironically, that very existence was its downfall. Welcome, 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 welcome to my grave. The curse stuttered and skipped. After taking Aoko's kick, crashing into the ceiling, and finally turning back to the ground, the puppet was no longer in any shape to move. Its internal structure warped from the impact. The drum of the music box that powered it had bent. If you curse anyone, curse your designer. If they'd given you even a single dynamo, you would have been just a little heavier. Whoa! A chunk of the ceiling crashed down in front of her, snapping her back to reality. She had been so focused on taking down the puppet that she had totally forgotten the situation she was in. The collapse of the Hall of Mirrors had already begun. Yeah, you probably need to leave. Crap, I better get a move on.
3, 2, 1. Boom, bitch. There was no time to savor her victory,
No place to pity her opponent. If she stayed here any longer, she should share the same fate. The way things stood, it was already hard for her to imagine actually getting out alive. Book it, Aoko! Even so, she slapped herself on the cheeks and started moving. This was her reward for the battle that had only lasted a scant few seconds. With her breath still ragged from the strain and excitement, she ran as fast as she could toward the exit.
There goes Kitsuland's Hall of Mirrors.
Second by second, the castle's collapse accelerated. With its supports gone, it was folding in under its own weight. Out of my way!
There goes the barrier. It made escaping from the basement extremely difficult.
Although she ran through the maze using the shortest path, she'd almost been crushed by the ceiling once along the way. This was the third time she had to pause to deal with falling debris. She blasted away the rubble in the staircase without missing a beat. When the puppet was damaged in their fight, its circuit jamming had disappeared too.
Up. There goes the pillar. Better get the fuck out, Aoko.
She ran at a breakneck speed. The strain of the situation kicked her brain into overdrive. The falling ceiling seemed to move in slow motion. It was similar to how someone's entire life could flash before their eyes on the verge of death. Right now, for her, every single second expanded into 5. Her sharpened senses elongated her perception of time.
Are you kidding me?
She ascended the rubble-strewn stairs from the crumbling basement to the collapsing first floor. The fact that the lobby was still clear was a miracle in and of itself, but what's more, the all-important path to the exit was still standing. Guess it's my lucky day. The underground maze didn't run under the entryway, so there was no chance of the floor there giving out beneath her. Only the ceiling would collapse, and the scaffolding should hold up until the very end. She'd made it this far, telling herself that whether or not she'd escape hinged entirely on if fate allowed her to reach the lobby. And she'd done it. Luck was on her side. All she had to do now was use her remaining strength to run straight ahead and... It was only for 0.2 of a second, but her feet wavered. Perhaps it was naivete or a sense of obligation. She shook off the image that had floated through her mind and started running toward the exit. Just so you know, we won't be able to coordinate with each other. It's not that great of a strategy. We'll both do what we have to do, then get to the exit as fast as possible on our own, okay? When she told him that 5 minutes ago, he nodded, looking just a little uneasy. It was only now that she'd wondered why. Ugh, come on, focus, Aoko. This isn't the time for that. Even this passage wouldn't last much longer. If she turned around now, she'd probably see the end closest to the maze collapsing. But then, turning around wasn't an option, was it?
I'm sure Sojiro's just fine.
The building and her luck were both at their absolute limits. The fact that she'd made it this far unharmed was nothing short of a miracle, and she couldn't afford to have a single thing go wrong. If she sprained her ankle, lost her balance, or even sneezed, that would be it. A simple pat on the back would be game over. And so, of course... Oh, fuck. Oh, I knew that thing was gonna come back. She saw it clearly. From the rubble of the collapsing stairway, death arose to take her with it. A corpse was dragging itself out of hell. Still alive. Still moving. crawling. It had followed her upstairs and watched as she desperately tried to save herself. The puppet's arm shot out. There was no need to turn around. She could see it coming in the mirror. Les serviteurs, les serviteurs, les serviteurs, les serviteurs. Growing, twisting, stretching. This time, there was no avoiding it, no way to dodge. The puppet with her face sang, "Welcome to my home. Sink into death. Become dust in whispers. Gouge out my heart. I will kill you." What? For a split second, she doubted her own eyes. What happened in the end was almost unbelievable. "You sure are persistent." The boy who had been waiting in the lobby broke the puppet's arm, a fierce expression on his face. Honestly, anger didn't suit him. In his hands, he was holding a fire extinguisher. He must have been in the maze the whole time, looking for something he could use as a weapon. No, more importantly, that couldn't be the reason he was still in the lobby, could it? She didn't even want to consider the possibility.
Yep, I knew he was going to come back.
Sojiro! She stopped the feat she swore she'd never stop and extended her hand. "It's fine now, so hurry!" He threw down the fire extinguisher and started running. The ceiling was falling down like dominoes now. Through the dirt and dust, they kept moving forward. Through the collapsing passage, they ran as fast as they could. And so, the castle shuddered its last. With a thunderous crash and a billow of dust, the final show of the fairy tale kingdom that symbolized Kitsyland came to an end.
Well then. Puppet should be dead.
The life and death marathon was over. The two who had just for a moment shared their sorrows, joys, and destinies laid their weary bodies out on the lawn, soaking in a strange sense of solidarity. Their tinnitus was already fading. Even a tremor of that magnitude seemed unreal in this rusted amusement park. Aoko spoke to the boy beside her, as the reverberations of the collapse pierced through the ruins. "So, you're alive?" "Yeah." The way she clicked her tongue was cute, but the meaning behind it couldn't have been more sinister. "Aoko, what happened to that thing? What did you think? It got crushed into a million little pieces." He sighed, apparently only somewhat relieved by her frank response, the reason being. "But don't you think you should be more worried about yourself, Sojiro? His misfortune was only just beginning."
Don't you think somebody's going to come investigate that? Like that, the rumbling and the castle collapsing and everything? You were a bully when you were little, weren't you?
On the contrary, I don't have a sadistic bone in my body. So do you understand your position? She sat up, a broad smile on her face. Sojiro hung his head and wondered why he felt a sudden chill in the air even though her voice and expressions were so friendly.
Because they're probably not. I'm really sorry.
Don't give me that. Our agreement was based on a single fundamental premise, remember? You said it yourself. It was a transaction. You make yourself useful and I let you go.
I know. That's why I'm apologizing. Well, to be fair, he did save your life. Even though, it was pretty much luck. More or less.
He turned his head away, sulking. Aoko was taken aback by his sudden bout of childishness. Probably. If she had to guess, he was more angry at himself than he was at her. The problem wasn't that she was going to let him go, but that he hadn't been able to help. She sighed for what felt like the millionth time that day. It was hard to say what was worse, his unbelievable kindness or her own soft-heartedness for buying into it. "Well then, are you ready?" Of course not, but a promise is a promise. In the end, I couldn't do anything. It was true. He hadn't accomplished anything she expected him to. Then again, she looked back at the fallen Hall of Mirrors. When his role as bait ended in such spectacular failure, what had he done? He went out of his way to find a fire extinguisher to use as a weapon, and waited in the lobby as the maze collapsed around him, convinced that he shouldn't leave on his own. It was a stupid choice, and the exact opposite of the one she'd made herself. Well, maybe that's good enough. She couldn't believe how naive she was being, but at the same time, she was strangely satisfied. After all, he really had saved her. A smile blossomed deep within her heart, even if it was only for a second. The bravery to keep on waiting in that situation was commendable. He dropped the ball, but the after-sales service was satisfactory. I guess I've got no choice. She nodded, then hopped to her feet. Don't worry, I'll keep our promise someday.
I'll kill you someday, just not today. Doing her best to feign indifference, she extended a hand to the boy who was still collapsed on the ground.
Whatever the result, the fact is you helped me. So as a special treat, I'll leave you alone tonight. She looked away, cheeks burning red. Though her profile was different, it was unmistakably the brilliant face of the girl Sojiro had seen that day when he first arrived in the city. What? She must have felt the eyes on her, because she frowned and shot him a glare. Nothing, it's just that you're actually surprisingly sincere. He took her outstretched hand, and she hefted him up, thinking that he was the last person on earth she wanted to hear that from. By the way, you said you'll leave me alone tonight, but what about tomorrow? Well, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. She shrugged her shoulders, not sure what she would do herself. It was an odd gesture coming from her, and Sojiro couldn't help but smile. Solidarity between those who escaped death together, a fleeting camaraderie. Just for tonight, the air between them was calm and gentle. A lot of things had happened, but the terrible midwinter night's dream was finally over. They had overcome their ordeal and could leave the kingdom of mirrors behind them. But before that... How selfish of you, Aoko. Is that really something you can decide all on your own?
Is that Alice? Yep, that's Alice.
A voice rang out, beautiful as a birdsong, yet ruthless as a machine. Alice. Aoko's voice trembled as she called the name.
God damn, she looks intimidating.
Black clothes descended upon the plaza. The night was not yet over. Koonji Alice, the witch who terrified even Aoko, the personification of the night who allowed no witnesses, had come.